So I want to take a moment and introduce her, and then you can join me in hopefully a exciting conversation. So Ana Sazonov is the executive director of the Columbia Jewish Federation in South Carolina. She served 2 years in the Israeli Defense Forces and trained soldiers to be combat ready. She earned her bachelor's degree in business and economics and went on to earn a master's degree in Jewish professional leadership and nonprofit management from Brandeis University. She served as the Israeli fellow to Emory University in Atlanta, where she oversaw everything related to Israel life, education, programming, experience. In addition, she created an online platform in Greater Atlanta, which provides hundreds of Russian-speaking Jews the opportunity to connect to their roots and experience their heritage. Please join me in welcoming Ana to the stage.
Good evening.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background. I gave a little bit of your bio, but introduce yourself more personally to our group.
That was definitely a short bio. It's longer. You can visit the website of Columbia Jewish Federation and check it out. Just kidding. So first of all, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank you for inviting me, and I want to thank you all for taking part supporting Ukraine. So my name is Ana Sazonov. I'm the executive director of Columbia Jewish Federation. Currently, I'm the youngest executive director of all 146 federations across North America. And I was born in Ukraine, living in Ukraine until the age of 6. So I lived under the Soviet Union. And after the Soviet Union collapsed back in the 90s, with the help of one of the Jewish organizations, the Jewish Agency for Israel, I moved to Israel and kind of discovered my Jewish identity. One thing led to another, and after experience my life in Israel, part of it is to serve in the military, and I was a basic training commander for 2 years, graduated in Israel, worked in the for-profit industry. I decided that something is missing in my life. I had a bigger calling. One thing led to another. I ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, y'all, working at Emory University and part of the Jewish organizations there. And suddenly, I found my calling, or better to say, I drank the Kool-Aid with everything to do with a nonprofit Jewish world and decided to stay in that world. Got my master's degree at Brandeis University, and then got accepted to be the executive director of Columbia Jewish Federation. So this is my story in a nutshell. Though, of course, there is more addings to that, but this is what brought me here 5 years ago, or 6 years ago.
Yeah, so you were born in Ukraine, you immigrate to Israel, and then you immigrate to the United States about 5 years ago, correct?
Correct. So whenever somebody asks me, like, where are you from? I'm like, well, it depends on the year.
And one thing that's very impressive, tell them how many languages, tell them which languages you speak.
I speak 4 languages. I speak Ukrainian, Russian, Hebrew, and English. I can communicate in Spanish. Yes, so.
Yeah, so pretty impressive background, and really living a pretty remarkable life from, as you talked about, where you came from to being the youngest executive director of all of the Jewish federations across the states. And then something happened this February, right, about 8 months ago, that really rocked your world. What happened in February?
February 24th, Russia invaded my homeland. A week before that, so in the past 2 years, my parents moved back to Ukraine, and a week before that, they went back to Israel by accident, not knowing that the war is going to happen. But I found myself sitting in my apartment in Columbia, South Carolina, thinking to myself, what can I do to support my people? What can I do to support freedom and democracy right now? So since February 24th, I tried to do everything in my power and my ability to support my country. But it's not only to support my country, It's also to support the values that we all appreciate, the values of freedom and democracy, and to be there for others. So I went on social media and started to share my story and start to share as much information as I can about Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Because let's be honest, and you can raise your hand or just like be true to yourself. Before February 24th, did you know where Ukraine located on the map? Did you know a little bit more about the Ukrainian people and who we are? And the basic thing is like which language they speak. The majority of the Americans and the majority of the people across the world didn't know anything about Ukraine, and they didn't know anything about the Ukrainian people. And I think since February 24th, we as Ukrainians and Ukraine proved to the world and showed the world who we are. And we have one message that we share with everybody: be brave like Ukraine.
Yeah. So, so tell us the picture that we're looking at now. This is she sent the picture. I said, "Are you sure you want to use this picture?" I just want to double check. And she said, absolutely, and the reason it's so sentimental to you.
100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
Tell them what.
Yes, this is a picture of me not sleeping during the night and making sure that my family is safe. And literally checking every minute of the day, where is the bombing and the shelling are at? And if it's around my family. And how much damage has been done. Because again, Ukraine has been fighting, that's what we thought, of the second largest and greatest army in the world. Ukraine has been fighting Russia since February 24th. The state and the country that we all, taught to be afraid of. And Ukraine, this small country in Eastern Europe, it's been putting up a fight against the second greatest army in the world. So me, on February 24th, asking myself, is Ukraine going to be there tomorrow? Are we really going to win this? Is the world going to be with us? And I put my swallowed face with crying and not sleeping over the night and just sharing a straight message. Be with Ukraine. Be with democracy and freedom.
So you took the events of February, and then within 60 days in April, you felt like it was time for you to personally travel, but you couldn't actually go into Ukraine, even though it's your home country. You had to stay on the border. So talk a little bit about, or first, actually, this is a great story, because this is really what triggered you to say, I need to go. The story about your grandmother and the...
So that's not my grandmother.
Well, I mean, but
yeah. They're all dead, sorry.
They don't know that. They
I want to be honest.
They don't know that.
So, with news coming in following February 24th, and you read I was stick to the news all the time and trying to rely on reliable sources of information, because in those days you have no idea what's fake news, what real news. And then I saw many articles about Ukrainian Holocaust survivors that literally survived Hitler, and now they died because of Putin. I'm a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. My grandfather survived Hitler and any pogroms out there. I'm continue the heritage of my family to be a proud Jew right now. And I saw this and I thought to myself, what can we do to stop this? What can we do to make this world a better place? Because it's kind of like history repeats itself. We've been in the same scenario about 70, 80 years ago. And now we have an opportunity to impact the world And I thought to myself, what can I do? I speak the languages. This is my home. What can I do? So one thing led to another.
And in April, you made your first trip post-war back to Ukraine, and actually to Poland, because you weren't allowed into the country because of what was going on.
Correct.
So what did you do on your first trip?
So on my first trip, and thanks to the organizations that I'm part of, so the Jewish Federations of North America, along with our partner organizations, Jewish Agency for Israel and the Joint Distribution, basically created a volunteer mission to the borders of Ukraine and Poland. So I spent 2 weeks helping Ukrainian refugees on the borders of Poland, on the borders of Ukraine and Poland, and interacting with individuals that just crossed the border. So the picture that you see right now, we're talking about people that escaped death. Some of them lost everything. Some of them just escaped. They packed the minimum amount of things that they can, because they crossed the border from the east to the west with nothing. They crossed in volunteer cars and vans. A bus that can fit about 20 people fitted 45 people. They drive for hours. I'm talking about 36, 48 hours on the road, avoiding missiles, shelling, bombing, shooting, in order to survive. So when they crossed the border, they had this feeling that they're going to survive and everything is going to be good. But that was only the beginning of their journey. Because now they need to think, where should I go? What should I do? The majority of them do not speak English or any other language. They speak only Ukrainian, if at all, because some of them speak a mix of Ukrainian and Russian. And when I met them on the border with this Ukrainian hairband, speaking in their own native language, welcoming them and saying, hey, everything's going to be okay. And asked them, do you know where you want to go? And the majority of them responded, I just want to go home. For the majority of them, there is no home. There is nothing left. And now they need to realize or to think and to calculate everything in their head. Where should I go? Should I stay in Poland? Should I stay here? Should I go to Germany? Should I go to Israel? Should I go to America? We don't know. The majority of them just want to go home. And I saw brave women taking their kids with them, crossing the border when they left their husbands, their parents, everything behind. Again, with a huge question mark. What's going to happen next? And the picture that you see right now.
Yeah, tell them. It's a great story.
This is Nadezhda, the woman on the right. Nadezhda in English, it's hope. I met Nadezhda and her husband next to the doctor's office. So we had an American doctor. I was the interpreter between English, Ukrainian, and vice versa. And they came to the office, the doctor's office, and they complained about dizziness and kind of like a fatigue. And that makes sense. And I met them and started a conversation, and apparently Nadezhda, she's blind. Both of them, in their 80s, mid-80s, crossed the border, and they came all the way from Kherson area that was back then shelled, bombed, destroyed by the Russians. And they made their way miles away from the east side of Ukraine to the west side of Ukraine. They were on the road about 48 hours. That makes total sense that she was a little bit dizzy. And when you meet the refugees, you know, there's a lot of questions that I could ask them. How is it? What is it? What's going on there? But we cannot ask them those questions because we need to make sure that they still keep their optimism and they still, you know, get their power and will to keep going. So Nadezhda shared a story with me. She said, I had a dream. And in my dream, I'm reaching to the age of 100 and I'm celebrating my 100th birthday. And through the entire few hours that I spent with them, I told her, Nadezhda, both of us are going to celebrate your 100th birthday in Ukraine. Both of us are going to be back there and we're going to rebuild the country and we're going to make sure that you celebrate your birthday in Ukraine. And I gave both of them a big hug, and I wished them best of luck. I have no idea what happened with Nadezhda and her husband. I put them on the bus for the next journey, and I have no idea if they made it. Because again, once you cross the border, this is only the beginning of the journey for them. We have no idea what's happened to a lot of the refugees that cross the border. And I don't want to start talking about sex trafficking, human trafficking that is happening. There is so many consequences to this war that we're not aware of. And it's only the beginning. Yes, we can, count the casualties, but there is a lot of unknown. And we're still in the middle of the war.
Yeah. So, a remarkable story, a couple in their 80s traveling 2 days. And it's not like someone was helping them. They traveled on their own, the wife being blind, 2-day journey to the Polish border. So you wrap up that trip, and what's interesting to me is we had a Q&A planned, and then the rest of this we kind of had to go on the fly because unexpectedly, Ana was in the Ukraine 3 days ago, and we're going to talk about that here. But it reminded me with Mara Eliason today, when you talk about where do you get the news, who's credible? Well, Ana was there 3 days ago. Hard to get someone more credible or information more timely. So talk about the trip that you just did over the last 2 weeks, when now you got to go into Ukraine, and not just Ukraine, you're visiting family, but talk about what happened going east towards Russia.
So at the end of September, I decided to go and visit my family and to take some time off from my work and just go visit them, because you have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, and it's good to be around your family. So one thing led to another. I gave a ride to an American volunteer, and I gave him a ride from the western side of Ukraine to Kiev. And we started talking about his experience there. One thing led to another. 12 hours after that, I found myself at the eastern side of Ukraine, around Izium. The village that we were at was liberated from the Russians by Ukraine about 24 hours before that. We're talking about people that lived under occupation in the past 6-7 months. People that didn't have access to running water, power, and access to the entire world. They had no idea what's happening right now.
So just to jump in and make sure you appreciate, she visits family, goes all the way to the eastern border, unplanned, sort of spontaneously, and arrives in a city that has been occupied by Russians since the war started. She arrives with 6 cars?
4.
4 cars, so this is not a military envoy, this is volunteers. 4 cars arrive in a border city that the Ukrainians drove the Russians back out of 24 hours before she got there. Yeah. So she arrives literally as the Russians are retreating, and there's still fires burning, homes are destroyed, and you walk in with 4 cars, and what do you bring? What do you do?
So we were part of a humanitarian aid supply. We were the 3rd mission coming into this area, because again, before that, 6 months prior to that, this entire area was occupied by Russians. Again, no access to the world. People don't know what's going on. People haven't had the opportunity to have a decent shower. Think to yourself, can you survive 6 months, 7 months without running water, soap, hygiene products? Not access to food, money, anything. And you cannot leave, because if you leave, you have a 50-50 chance, because the Russians can basically bomb you and kill you while you try to escape. So I found myself providing humanitarian aid to about, there was left 3,000 people in this village. While we gave the aid, I was with a bulletproof vest, and I had a helmet also in the car, and I had earbuds basically to protect my ears, because we were bombed during that time. Imagine a situation that I provide food, and I hear the bombing getting closer and closer and closer. While we were providing the aid, the family reached out to me because I was the only person that spoke Ukrainian, because the majority of the volunteers that were there were English speakers, so I kind of was the interpreter between both parties. And she asked if she can ride with us to Kiev because she wanted to escape. And we're like, oh, yeah, of course, you can go with us. You have 30 minutes to get ready. Great. Before we got to her home, we asked her, do you know about any, suspicious points here? Anything that we should check? Any gifts that were left by the Russians? And she said, yes, let's check the school. We went to the school, the regional school there, and the entire school was filled with mines, bombs, anything that you can imagine. Now imagine a kid going to the school and basically stepping on the mines. On top of that, before we entered the city, the security team guided us. You're not stepping on the grass. You're not going to areas that you don't know. Every place that I stepped on, the security team checked it before because the Russians left mines everywhere. So 30 minutes later, while we hear the whistles and the bombing getting closer and closer.
These are air sirens. When you say
Yes.
whistles, right?
Yeah, the
Air raid sirens.
no, in that area there is no.
Oh,
It's just you hear the bombing because it's too close. We found ourselves 3 kilometers from the Russians. If we didn't take the right turn, probably I wasn't here. But we're escaping as fast as we can to avoid any additional shelling. We have 4 cars. One of them is a security car. I'm in the car with the family trying to flee and make sure that they go into safety. I wasn't prepared for this journey. Literally, I found myself there. But I felt that there was a purpose to be there. As the same thing that you share with the butterfly.
yeah. Again, context. She was in Ukraine Friday.
Yes.
Today's Monday. So she arrived yesterday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, this is like, and speaking of breaking, even when we talked last night, more information, talk about what happened today.
So this morning, in Ukraine, it was afternoon, majority cities of Ukraine were bombed and shelled. About 48 rockets were shot on Ukraine, made a lot of damage. Areas that I was at in Ukraine, literally less than a week ago, visiting Kiev, were bombed, destroyed. 12 people got killed today.
Your family's hometown?
Thank God they're safe, but it was very close to them. One of the bombs were in a city next to them.
So up until this point, the war has been going on the eastern side, and then as of this morning, massive, the largest strike since the war began hit the western side, which is the more developed side. So, this is no longer just war in the outer regions. This is in the heart of the major cities.
Yes. When the war started, I participated in different news shows and stuff like this and sharing the information about Ukraine. One of the things that I shared is that I'm afraid that something else is going to pop up the news and people will forget about Ukraine. And I know a war can be very tiring. It can take a lot of energy, take a lot of time. But this is what's happening right now. People not aware of what's happening in Ukraine. People are dying every day in Ukraine. Ukraine has been bombed, shelled, destroyed. My beautiful country, my beautiful homeland. The biggest provider of food in the world is being shelled and bombed and destroyed. And here we are, sitting here, not knowing what's happening. So I want to remind you all, we want to remind you all, that there is still war going on. We're in 2022, and there is a war on a European soil that's happening, an actual one. And believe me, I heard the whistles of the artillery that was flying above my head. That was real, that was actual. And we need to help, and we need to support.
So what can we do? And again, there's no obligation to give money. That's not primarily what this is about. This is just bringing in awareness. I learned a lot of things. My grandmother's actually Ukrainian. I lived with her from the time I was 3 until 22 when I got married. There were so many things that I learned from Ana that you don't hear in American news. So this was much about bringing credible, timely information. Should you desire to help, talk about the 2 links here, and they're in the app. If you go to conference information and search Global Gift, you'll see links, or Patrick will send them out as a notification on the app, so if you're interested. But talk about what are these 2 organizations specifically, where will the money go if somebody wants to give directly?
I will start by saying, before we talk about the apps, my main message here is for y'all to keep Ukraine in your minds, hearts, and action. Ukraine has been fighting a fight not only for themselves. Ukraine took the responsibility and the obligation to fight a fight for all of us. They're fighting for the values of democracy and freedom. If Ukraine will fall, we're all gonna fall. And we do stand for Ukraine. So the links that you see right now, the first one is the organization that I supported when I went to the eastern side of Ukraine. Basically, it's an organization that brings Ukrainians and international volunteers together. It was founded by a Canadian woman that moved to Ukraine 20 years ago. There is no overhead expenses. Everything, every cent, every penny goes to support Ukraine. And one of the things that I share with you, in the cost of $1,700, you can support a mission like the mission that I went on. We supported about more than 50 families with supply of food for at least a month. This amount in America sounds like nothing in Ukraine.
So $1,700 US
Yes.
will provide a transportation of essentially food and supplies for 50 people for a month in those remote cities in the eastern half of Ukraine.
Because every dollar in the US goes a long way in Ukraine right now. So think about it. Every time you go to Starbucks and buy a coffee, that could be a lot of money in Ukraine, and that can provide a lot of aid in Ukraine. So that's the first one. I provide humanitarian aid, medical aid, and also support the military. The second one, this is the official Ukrainian government fundraiser. And you can support the military, you can support humanitarian aid, and you can support rebuilding Ukraine. Because again, Ukraine has a lot to offer to the world, a lot. If it's brilliant people, if it's the beautiful land, if it's amazing resources that we all can use in the world, Ukraine can impact everybody. And this is our opportunity to be part of this, to be part of Ukraine. And there is a lot of work ahead of us. This is only the beginning. We know a little bit about the impacts of the war. And again, the war is still going, and we have no idea for how long. And I'm here to remind you, as your new Ukrainian friend, that the war is still going on.
Yeah, well, yeah, lady, thank you. Give me.